Technically, you don't need to hack an Uber. You just need 200 euros and a Telegram account, and you can just buy the whole new profile.
A whole world of trouble.
This is the last spot where you expect to get scammed.
Why are mobility platforms especially vulnerable to identity fraud?
If I answered that question, I think then all the problems in financial crime industry would be solved.
Super scary. Which way do you see it going as an industry?
This is one of the only way how to track the fake identities and crime and fraud rings.
Do you think the industry is moving fast enough when it comes to securing connected cars?
It took me a second to think about it.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the final episode of this season of What the Fraud, a podcast by Sumsub where digital fraudsters meet their match. I'm Thomas Tereniak, currently responsible for some of our very exciting partnerships here at Sumsub, the global verification platform helping to verify users, businesses, and transactions as well. This week, we're looking into how the cars we drive and rent are becoming the new frontier for cybercrime. From ghost drivers to fake IDs to money laundering and QR code scams. The mobility space is now facing a new wave of digital threats. Our special guest this week is Karolina Kausylaite, compliance manager at Tesla Financial Services and an expert in anti-money laundering as well. She's worked at PPRO, N26 and Danske Bank, tackling financial crime from multiple angles. And today, she's here to help us understand how criminals exploit modern vehicle services and what the industry must do to stay ahead. Karolina, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start from your journey. You've built a career tackling financial crime across major fintechs and banks, but I read this started all the way back at university. Can I ask what sparked your interest?
Actually, that was a very unexpected journey. You probably know that I studied political science. So I actually started working in Western Union and I thought I'm just going to make some money, start my career, and we'll go into political science, maybe start international relations job. And when I started working in Western Union, I was faced immediately with financial crime fighting. And it was just so interesting because it felt like, in a way, I was saving a world. So, and we were helping people who were like, not sure who they are transferring money to. We happened to have people who come over to the office and they would say, oh, sorry, I think I just transferred $10,000 to a person who promised me some money in Nigeria. And it felt so interesting. And I thought, okay, I will start looking into this more broadly. And that's how I started studying criminology, got into terrorism financing studies. And here we are. I explored different industries from consultancies, neobanks, and now I'm here in automotive industry, which is a different type of industry to explore when it comes to financial crime. It's so different from everything I have seen.
Certainly a very different type, and that's what we'll be exploring today as well. So you now focus, Karolina, on mobility at Tesla Financial Services. So what fraud trends are hitting this space hardest right now from your perspective?
Well, there are quite a lot. And quite recently I was talking to my colleagues and we call this one as like the easiest one to detect. But as I was made aware that it's probably not that common for the outside world. So let's talk about QR codes plus phishing, which is now called in our industry as phishing. So this is happening when the QR codes are tampered with the fake ones. And we see this very often in EV charging stations, parking lots. It also happens quite often in bigger cities like Berlin when you want to try and rent out the scooter or a bike. And the essential actually of this fraud is to steal your personal information and the payment information. So this is what is happening currently because, I mean, when you try to pay for parking or rent out a car, this is the last spot where you expect to get scammed. It's very seamless, easy process, and then accidentally you are in phishing attack.
A whole world of trouble, absolutely. Identity fraud is a massive concern, right?
Correct.
But one thing that the industry is looking at is tackling it head on. Why are mobility platforms especially vulnerable to identity fraud versus, let's say, other industries?
I think the mobility industry evolved so fast and it heavily relies on this seamless customer onboarding, providing the services really fast and in a timely manner with like product at being at the top, and like actually compliance and anti-money laundering prevention is being as the last step. So it's actually really easy to misuse this industry for identity fraud in this case. One thing, it's still in a very gray regulatory zone, and the regulations are not keeping up with the fraud tendencies that we see. Since it's very easy to get the car sharing contract on, like you just take a selfie, take a picture of your ID, and you unlock the car. What banking providers do, right? Like they monitor your account. What are you doing with your finances? What are your daily transactions? What's going on with the account? In the mobility industry, once you get your account opened, you open the contract with actually the car service provider. That's it. There is no ongoing monitoring. That's where it stops. And that's how it's very easy to misuse these type of accounts for the fraudulent and money laundering activities.
Super scary. Which way do you see it going as an industry, right? Are they going to become super regulated, specifically in the EU and the UK?
That's a very good question. And essentially, I don't really know. I don't think they're going to be heavily regulated. But I think the regulators will start to take a look into one possible solution, which would actually be information sharing between the providers. So what the banking industry is doing, and the banking in neobanks or tech space, they share information about the customers, like where the money is coming from, what's going on with this person if they have concerns. I think this is the next step for mobility industry as well, where we will be forced to share the information with our banking partners, payment provider partners, with maybe following, if you consider Uber, Share Now, the other car providers, they can just share information and exchange what's going on. And this has actually already been called out quite recently, following the case example from Frankfurt, where the CEO of FreeNow, when they unveiled this fraud ring, they called for like the action to share information between the car service providers, because this is one of the only way how to track the fake identities and crime and fraud rings.
Got it. And that makes a lot of sense now. One tactic that keeps coming up is ghost drivers, Karolina. And we recently saw a case in Boston in the United States where fake IDs were used for as many as 2,000 drivers. Can you explain, please, what a ghost driver is and how serious a problem it is as well?
So the ghost drivers is actually rather new fraud trend that we see in the industry. So from the beginning, the ghost driver is someone who is not supposed to drive that car. So someone passed the QIC onboarding verifications, but someone else is operating the vehicle. So it's in the very simple words. To add on this, actually, there are 3 different types of ghost drivers, and that's something that we should be looking into. So the first one is the synthetic ghost. So someone actually faked the ID that does not belong to anyone. So it could be altered and it would not identify any real person. And then they fake all the onboarding process and use the account. The other one would be the mule ghost. This is essentially also very difficult to detect, but that would be the same principle as the mule account in banking terms, right? So someone passes the QIC onboarding checks at any mobility provider, but then they sell or rent out that account, and then someone else is using it and driving that car. And the third type is a bot ghost. So that is like the most technology driven one, where it does not require actually human intervention. So someone actually might be legitimately passing onboarding checks and registering with a platform, but they actually never drive the car. So they create a code or a bot that simulates the routes, the locations, pickups, and that's how they help to launder money. So technically, all the illicit funds, that's how they're entering as a legitimate payments into the account, and then they can withdraw it. In addition to all of this, actually, then they can age the account for 3 years and keep on using this, and because it's barely catched. It's really difficult to track this because we don't do any ongoing monitoring. There's no behavior analytics on that. And then they sell it on Telegram or dark web. And this was actually written in a German media actually quite recently, that technically you don't need to hack an Uber. You just need 200 euros and a Telegram account, and you can just buy the whole new profile. So essentially, the ghost drivers, that's how they operate. They either rent account, sell account, or they do all together, mixing the legitimate funds with illicit ones.
I find that super interesting, Karolina, especially on the front that, of course, they're money laundering here. Yeah. And let's say these actual businesses are taking a fee, which is cost of business for these money launderers. And of course, they're creating these bots, which will be the users at the end of the day. So it's two-way. The mobility industry as a whole is a big target, let's say, for money laundering. We saw this case, of course, in Germany, where luxury vehicle rentals were used to launder massive amounts of money. And these are through generally criminal networks, right? Could you walk us through how these schemes would typically work within a criminal network, let's say in a country like Germany?
So let's say criminals are establishing fake companies in Germany, Italy, Spain, Austria. Those companies actually providing the services of luxury vehicles rentals or the sales. And what happens is that then criminals can launder money using the legitimate purposes, using those companies. So in one of the cases I actually read through was where they can pay monthly fees for the car that actually doesn't exist because the company doesn't own any cars in general. It's just a front company that technically has this business, but there are no real cars. But that's how the criminals integrate funds into a legitimate system. So in your banking app, if someone, the compliance team would look at it, okay, it seems like these payments of, 500 euros a month goes to this company, which by Googling, it seems like they're doing their car leasing business, and it seems like rather luxurious cars, so it doesn't really flag immediate suspicions. And that's how those money integrate our financial system. And it from the first look, it looks perfectly fine. Same goes with car dealership. Our industry is cash intensive. It's quite high cash as well, high value goods. And it's easy to transport these internationally. So if someone buys a car, let's say a very expensive one, I know for 300,000, the newest version of Mercedes, it would look very, very normal if someone would transfer, have like some kind of fake invoice, this is the agreement, I purchased the car from this company, this is the amount. From the first look at the transactional behavior, you wouldn't think that something is wrong. And that's how all the funds that were once illegitimate becomes very legitimate and is part of our industry. And then they can also use those funds to actually buy art, luxurious cars again, and it's kind of vicious circle in this network. And about this specific case, it was more than one case like that was uncovered within Germany and Europe. And this is the interesting fact for my compliance teams and compliance professionals. This was uncovered actually using filed suspicious activity reports and suspicious transactions reports. So in our industry, we sometimes think, we do this investigation, we file those reports, and we sometimes get no feedback. Maybe there is no point. There's not much happening. Sometimes we question it. Why do we even do this? And then you read about the case like this, and it actually started the investigation, the filed suspicious activity reports in Germany and Italy. So that's a good news for the compliance professionals.
I can imagine so. And what a good story. Thank you, Karolina. I think from the perspective of under-reporting as well, it might be quite difficult to see how grand the problem is overall. And as you'd mentioned, moving, let's say, these illicit funds into this money laundering machine through, let's say, the mobility industry, and then forward on washing and washing again, it makes it very clear how big the issue is. When it comes back to, let's say, us fighting back, what can companies actually do in this space? Are there obvious, let's say, red flags they should be watching for? Or does this, let's say, require a more agile, tech-driven approach?
Actually, it's a bit of both. So the compliance teams everywhere, they're required, and they should generally look if the customer's profile matches the activity. I know I said that ongoing monitoring is not very common practice, but there are some warning signs in the beginning. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, what we see is the ID. Does it look unusual? Because sometimes they're very good quality, and it's really difficult to, in these days, especially using AI, the deep fakes, it's very difficult to say, okay, that's actually the fake ID. But sometimes they actually do very little effort, and you can see the different fonts that something might be tried to be glued on the actual ID. It's a different color. If you Google the driver's license, you see it's completely outdated format. It shouldn't be like this anymore. So it's like the basic science. The next ones is as well to look a little bit into behavior analytics, which I think essentially our industry will move into that. So do we have a lot of signups from the same IP address? Because usually we use the phone or, well, very rarely the laptop, to sign up for something. And these things are being tracked. So do we see that there are 10 phones registered to one IP address? That would be like very unusual. And most of the systems in as part of the QIC would track this as a red flag. Why? Is there like a new sign up? Was it some problem at the onboarding? Or it's actually different users trying to create the fake identities or just scam the system. So that's one thing. The other thing would be just actually move towards the biometric data verification. So that's another solution that I would think would probably be the best approach, where we don't rely on a selfie that we took and posted once in the app, but actually before we unlock maybe a more luxurious, expensive car, we're not talking about the scooters and bikes here, you do a fingerprint authentication or a live selfie detect that would unlock the car. Because the verification at the car delivery or car pickup is very, very important for us, I think. And that's how we can ensure that someone who signed up with us is actually driving that car and not giving it away. If this type of detection would fail, we would immediately know that something is wrong. With the ghost drivers, if you think about this typology and the warning signs, I think there are like a whole set of different red flags. So the ghost drivers to detect is very, very difficult, but my speculation would be we should be looking at the GPS, at the locations. Do locations match? Are they closed off areas? Can you actually drive there? Because the bot and the script follows like exact rules that were set. So they will always be the same. So short-term rides, same amount of drives, the duration is the same, nothing changes. And that would be like a good way to detect for the system, that something is wrong. I think that would be my first thoughts about the warning signs. Additionally to all of this, actually, if the provider would offer the wallet services where, I don't know, you can easily transfer in, transfer out accounts, this is where another, also the rule for us would come in, monitor the transaction and payments, and probably as well include the banking partners into information sharing. Where is the money coming from? Well, how does it come in? Does it being transferred to crypto? If we have all the suspicions I just mentioned too, I would probably start looking into the payment information as well. Do we withdraw it very often, or it's just unusual? That's like super huge amounts, or it's always the same amount that is being paid. So there are quite a few to consider. And I think what's even complicated about that each case is very different. So that would be the trends that I would expect to see.
Very interesting. A lot of red flags, which you seem to have a lot of knowledge about, which is great. The fraud vectors and also the vulnerabilities of the mobility industry are really interesting. And of course, the capabilities of fraudsters with the use and advent, of course, of AI within their illicit behaviors, or let's say transactions, is also making it, I assume, more tough to detect, right? And that's why you can't just have a verification or a check of the user, driver, or someone else at the very start of the journey, but as you've mentioned just now, ongoing monitoring. You also mentioned a very interesting word earlier, quishing. From the perspective of quishing, where people use QR codes to commit fraud, can you break down how these scams would work and why it's becoming more common in the mobility industry as well?
So in the mobility industry, especially in electric vehicles industry, right, we care about the seamless experience.
Yeah.
For customers, it's often the first electric car. So they're very interested in all the automatic solutions that it offers. It's all about the customer experience. And as I mentioned before, this is the last place you would expect to get scammed. So first of all, it's very easy to pay for parking and charging using the QR code, and it's widely used in our industry. So what happens when someone puts the fake sticker, the QR code? Sometimes you can notice it because it peels off, but sometimes it's done very, very professionally. So what happens is the user scans the QR code, expects to pay for electric vehicle charging. And it prompts to the website that very often looks exactly like the one you're supposed to see when you pay for any charging. So essentially, it really mimics the same crime that phishing would do, the same damage that phishing attack would do. Then you enter all your payment information, your personal information, you click pay, and it somehow doesn't go through. You try again because you think it's your internet connection, maybe device is not. You try again, and you can get either your payment information stolen or a malware installed into your phone device, and it's kind of game over. In that sense, what the fraudster gains is the card information if you enter the payment details. What we always talk about in our financial crime prevention talks or trainings when we do is usually it's the same. Like you would get an email with a link, please click because you want a new laptop. You should apply the same logic when scanning any QR code, whether it's for the bike ride or it's for your vehicle charging. So always check the link that is being prompted. Is it actually electricvehiclecharging.com or it's like electricvehiclexxx.com and it looks super unusual. Look for grammatical mistakes, different fonts. It's usually they try to look the website legitimate, but sometimes it just doesn't work as professionally. If something is wrong happening, we're always ready to help our users and block the accounts. But this is so common because people are just not expecting. It's just like tap and go experience. They're very trustworthy. We're very into our new vehicle that we rarely think about the consequences here.
Especially valid for, of course, protecting users within the base of customers that you have, and of course the drivers as well. How do you see this developing as we move forward as a type of fraud within the industry?
That's why a lot of electric vehicle providers will go and implement that QR code payments into their own apps. So it could be internally developed tool, internally developed service. So you wouldn't have to use the random QR codes to pay for the car payments. On a smaller scale, when it comes to scooters and bikes, I think there's always going to be a human error. Just need to remain vigilant and to know what to do next if this mistake happens. We cannot protect everything. It's just human nature.
Certainly the case, human nature. We talk about it a lot on the podcast.
Yeah.
So we've been talking today about how mobility is becoming one of the most vulnerable targets for fraud. And here at Sumsub, we're not just tracking these trends, we're building the infrastructure to fight them. And this November, we're bringing global experts in AI, crypto, digital identity, fraud prevention, and compliance together at the What the Fraud Summit in Singapore, November 19th and 20th of 2025. We'll cover everything from identity verification in connected ecosystems to fraud signals in high-value transactions. Expect 50 or more expert speakers, over 500 attendees, and zero fluff. 2 days of sharp, insight, honest conversations, and practical frameworks you can actually use. So secure your spot now at sumsub.com/WTF-summit or hit the link in this episode's description. Welcome back, Karolina. We've talked a lot about fraud in mobility platforms, but vehicles themselves are becoming smarter as well, with in-vehicle payments, digital keys, and app-based access becoming the norm for everyday people like me and you. Do you think the industry is moving fast enough when it comes to securing connected cars? And what role do technologies like biometrics and behavioral monitoring play in securing connected mobility?
That's a very great question that we keep on asking ourselves on a daily basis. Because on one hand, GDPR and data privacy laws really protect our information and that we should not supply that information to the places that it's really unnecessary. Same in the financial services industry. We really are considering, do we actually need this customer data or is it just nice to have? So I think especially in Germany with data privacy concerns, we're very, very protective of these details. So this is the ongoing question that we try to answer, how to protect our customers in a way and getting the data we require and not treat them as a suspect for possible crimes. So that's the ongoing question. And I don't think we can ever answer this. But as I mentioned before, if we engage in information sharing within our industry, between industry players. And if we use more of live detection and biometric data, or we actually monitor the customer behavior, that would actually prevent this from going the wrong way. And we would not need to heavily overregulate the industry, ask for our customers for the payslips for the €3 ride. So I think if we just use a different approach where customer would agree to authenticate instead of sending us a selfie, but with a live video, I think that would really help us. And I think in terms of data protection rights, this would be equally effective.
Makes a lot of sense. So the role, of course, of technologies like biometrics, behavioral monitoring can't be understated, let's say, within their role in securing connected mobility. But from your perspective, Karolina, do you think the industry is moving fast enough when it comes to, let's say, securing connected cars, or are we quite slow in our speed and pace?
In short, no, we're not fast enough. Let's think about that. Fraudsters already use the AI and the deep fakes to impersonate people. They're already there. They use the darknet and any other channels on Telegram to exchange the information. What are the weaknesses of our QIC, onboarding, app weaknesses, where they can actually exploit certain traits. And when it comes to technology and us preventing that, we're one step behind. As well, in each industry in my career that we talked about, it's always the reactive approach and not the proactive one. So we wait for something to happen. We wait for the massive fraud ring and fraud incident to happen. And then we think, oh, we should actually keep on monitoring this because this is happening. But whenever we are facing the product growth, product strategy, somehow compliance, it comes after. And we always say that non-compliance actually costs more than compliance. And it's a common fight between the product and compliance where we try to say, let's think ahead. But unfortunately, that's why technology and the regulation is not keeping up, because we're always focusing on the product growth, how to get more customer friendly, how to get more seamless, and then everything else in controls comes after.
Especially when there's so much competition in the space. Correct. As well. It makes it very difficult. So, Karolina, what are the new battlegrounds in mobility fraud? I mean, what are people like you worrying about that the rest of us might not have yet seen?
I think the ghost drivers is the most new ones that we talked about. And I think they're quite a big thing in our industry. And we're trying to find a way how to actually deal with it and how to proactively prevent that type of activities. Besides that, I think we should also worry about our personal details being stolen and then sold somewhere else on the dark web or, as I mentioned, in the Telegram channels. And that's additional new battleground that I would identify, because this is huge. And I'm not quite sure if we actually still already know how to prevent this, because the details are being sold of the drivers, of the customers, and they're there for everyone to purchase for €200. And I think this is completely new one, in addition to everything we have covered today. And it's going to come as quite a big trouble.
Is there a silver bullet as well, Karolina?
If I answered that question, I think then all the problems in financial crime industry would be solved. I would just probably expect that all the financial players, so all the financial industry players, would invest in the compliance departments, in great systems that could prevent and monitor the behavior and the patterns that are unusual to the industry. Other than that, this is probably the best solution, the information sharing between the professionals and trying to do our best within our industry.
We've also seen great leaps in technology, both in the mobility sector, but also in tertiary industries in recent years. So, Karolina, what changes do you think are coming next? What are you specifically watching for?
So there are a couple of things that are changing. So first of all, I think we should mention the regulatory landscape. Yeah. So this year we have AMLA institution established in Germany, whose mission is actually to provide the guidance and on anti-money laundering and actually strengthen our controls. So I think in every industry, not necessarily in the mobility one, we actually wait for a bit more supervision, a bit more guidelines, how to protect ourselves, what is happening in the industry. They should provide us with like the information sharing between the companies. So that's one of the things. And I think AMLA, we have this expectation that another institution coming in actually will strengthen the regulatory requirements for us. The other thing that probably is quite expected is a use of AI. So fraudsters are using the AI to actually scam us and do the fake the identities and do the crime. But I hope with the upcoming months and years, we're going to use AI more to strengthen our controls, to actually make the barriers a bit more tougher to hack with the stolen or fake identities, with the tampered identities. And that would actually protect us in a way. So we're like looking forward to developments in that area. And I'm sure they're like very soon to come.
Those are some really good points as well. From the perspective of the issue we've covered today, we've seen so many different vectors of fraud, some red flags, which you've mentioned as well. But the issues arise, which are that this actually affects everyday people, right? Which want to use mobility apps to make their lives easier. So these users, but also for the drivers and other individuals on the marketplace function to actually make a living. And of course, this affects everyday people day to day, but also the tertiary effects of money laundering on financial, not only the financial betterment of criminals, but for terrorism, which of course you studied about and you've worked towards fighting throughout your career as well. What would you say is not focused on enough within the mobility sector? Because these businesses are trying to, as you mentioned, push the product forward, push growth forward, and that may be prioritized over not focusing on the customer base and making sure they're protected.
So to summarize all of this, I think in mobility industry, compliance is madly overlooked in general. So as we talked about throughout this episode, this is actually, it's all about the customer experience, about seamless onboarding. So compliance in general is very overlooked. But I think another important point that we should really, really consider that the mobility industry, automotive industry, is now part of whole financial industry, financial services, and a huge part of economic growth. So this is wildly overlooked. So we should not consider that, oh, it's just like 10 euro ride from the airport, but we should start thinking that this actually comes with a huge financial crime responsibility and compliance breaches. And it's just a huge industry.
I agree completely. I can see where you're going with that as well. It affects day-to-day lives, right? And it affects the ecosystem, which is every community, city, and not only locally, but internationally, right? And how people get to work, how people, of course, communicate very quickly. There's no longer the case where you're every day getting on a train, every day waiting for days and days, or hours and hours rather, for a car form to be filled out and then to rent something, right? But Karolina, these are some amazing points. But before we end the episode, we always dive into some questions to get to know you more on a personal level. Are you ready for 5 quick fire questions today, Karolina?
Sure, let's try.
Wonderful. 1, when choosing a digital wallet, do you go for more features or for better security?
Better security.
Excellent answer. What's one thing about fraud that still surprises you even after all of your experience?
Actually, human nature, that we still fall for very simple scams, whether it's scanning the QR code for the bike ride, or whether we receive an email saying, oh, you can buy this with a discount, just click here.
And I've learned to double check. I'm dyslexic, so it makes it very difficult to read those off the first try.
So we live and learn.
Yeah, we do. Have you ever been the victim of fraud yourself?
Well, yes, because I clicked on the link and I thought I will buy actually a Lego set, half price. Biggest mistake of my life. But of course, the money loss was very, very little. It was just 200 euros. So I consider this a little loss in comparison, but never again.
So now that you've lost your Lego, what's one habit you now rely on to stay safe online?
If I click on the link, I actually always check if it actually looks legitimate. That's one of the things. And if I can, I always make the payment via Apple Pay. I never, if there is an option to please transfer this amount of money to this bank account, I'm like, no. Either we do the instant card payment where I have it, or just Apple Pay. So these are the two things I feel like most secure with.
Excellent answer. But let's say, all things aside today, if you could have any other career other than the one that you're currently in, and all of the benefits, of course, of preventing fraud and helping society, what career would that be?
It took me a second to think about it, but I think I wouldn't change anything. I really like my career. I like the job I do. Maybe I would switch this a bit towards more delivering trainings to the teams, more educating on the side what we see in the current landscape, what are the AML trends or the fraud trends. I would probably talk more on the preventative side rather than being the officer. But other than that, I wouldn't change a thing. And I hope to stay in this industry for quite some time.
Karolina, what a wonderful answer. And of course, look, I think if you do want to educate, podcasts are the best way to go. You've been great today. So Karolina, thank you so much for joining us on the What the Fraud podcast and sharing your insight with us and our audience today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for joining us on this episode and this season of What the Fraud. We've had a jam-packed season covering everything from crypto scams and pig butchering to the growth of fraud as a service, hearing from someone who went from being one of the biggest scammers to becoming a huge anti-fraud fighter. We hope you've enjoyed it and learned as much as we have, and we can't wait to welcome you back for more episodes soon. Calling all listeners, we need your support. Please hit that follow button on your favorite podcast platform. And if this episode has left you feeling empowered, drop a review. It helps other individuals out there trying to dodge the digital tricksters. So let's cut the small talk and get down to business. Follow, comment, review. You know the drill. And if you want to hear more about what we do here at Sumsub and how your business can actually benefit from our verification services, definitely check out our website at www.sumsub.com and subscribe, of course, to all of our socials. What the Fraud is a Listen production. The producer is Adrian Bradley and the executive producer is Nick Minter. The producer from Sumsub is Mila Faravina. Stay safe and see you on the next one.